everyone, and welcome back to the news floor. If you haven't figured it out by now, I am your host. My name is Valerie Lee, and we are here every Wednesday at 12 Pacific time on the Lost Resort TV channel. Hopefully you figured that out by now because you're here with me live, which is awesome, but you can always follow the channel, give us a subscription if you can. You will get the notifications straight to your little Twitch inbox, which is always super helpful. Every single week, this is your one-stop shop for all things news, conversations, controversies, things you have to know going on in the world of dance, electronic music, and of course, we're going over new tunes, biggest releases from this week, also top choices from curators like Pete Tong, number one on Beatport, and of course NEWSFLOOR choices from yours truly. We interview, we talk to people from in and around the world of rave, your favorite artists. We get the scoop on new releases, we get the info on things and events that are going on in and around the culture, so tune in for all of that. This week is a special episode as usual. We are talking about some news. Not all of it is related to COVID, nightlife industry stuff, but some of it, of course, is. We're also hearing about news related to Billy McFarland, the Fyre Festival organizer. Remember him? Things with Stormzy related to design, which is always cool. And then, of course, we're talking about some news related to grants that have been given to those businesses and music industry that are suffering due to COVID. Always important topic as we get through these trying times. Hopefully they'll be over sooner rather than later. We're also going to listen to some top tracks. We have new stuff from Eric Prydz, which is always exciting. And we're also speaking to DJ Eclipse, who released his new album, or is about to release his new album. So we're going to get a sneak preview and some info on that. And then, of course, we're talking to Disco Donnie, which is really exciting. He has been a legend in the promoter scene here in North America for so long, and he has really been smashing it, staying busy in 2020 by putting on a bunch of successful drive-in shows, which you and I have probably heard of by now. It'll be great to get some insight from him, learning about what goes into creating a drive-in show, and maybe it'll convince you to go attend one. Who knows? But that's all in store for this week on the news floor. Stay tuned. We're going to get into it right now. All right, let's not hesitate. We're going to get straight into the news. This week, we are starting over in Miami. Miami-Dade County has reinstated its curfew a few days after lifting it. A bit of a bummer, but not the end of the world. A couple weeks ago here on the news floor, we actually talked a little bit, and we're excited to hear that Miami venue Space was going to be reopening its doors. They were changing things up, of course, to be COVID protected, adding a few new prominent updates like no freeform dance floor. It was going to be set up more like a day club where you're kind of confined to an area and a bartender comes to take your order and brings you drinks and such. Unfortunately, as of October 20th, Miami-Dade County has officially reinstated their midnight to 6 a.m. curfew. So that's definitely going to affect Space, which kind of the one of the best things about the venue is that they have a 24-hour license so they can actually party until the sun comes up. Unfortunately, that's going to have to be put on pause as this curfew goes into place. The mayor explained that they are preparing for more cases and a potential spike coming in mid-November. So hopefully, if all things go well, they will be able to lift that curfew and we'll hear good things from Space. But they do still have some events going on, so still successful in that they can actually have events and have artists play and have people come into the venue. Fyre Festival organizer Billy McFarland launched a new podcast from prison. Honestly, I can't even say that headline without laughing a little bit. Not because it's funny that he's in prison or anything, but the fact that this happened, Fyre Festival happened back in 2017, and this guy is still making headlines for just, juicing the Fyre Festival story, which honestly is impressive in its own weird way. We all remember him. He was the one who was in cahoots with Ja Rule, who kind of organized the eventual catastrophe that became known as Fyre Festival. He ended up going to prison after pleading guilty for fraud, but actually has come back into headlines because he has, like I said, created a podcast from prison. So his new podcast is called Dumpster Fire, spelled like Fyre Festival, F-Y-R-E, and features a host who has called and interviewed him on the phone from prison, and they're discussing all of the actions leading up to the festival in 2017. I'm not really sure if it's meant to be like his side of the story sort of thing, because I think we can all agree that he definitely was guilty and he also pleaded guilty. But the interesting addition to this story is that he's actually since been placed in solitary confinement following the release of the trailer for the podcast. His attorney explained that they believe the ongoing investigation relating to him being put in solitary confinement might stem from his participation in the podcast and the photographs that were taken and utilized in the trailer, but he argues that they were all properly used and that he has not violated any rules or regulations. So, remains to be seen if Billy will be let out of solitary confinement, but he for sure is still staying in prison and apparently still trying to put on this podcast. In other news, Stormzy's Glastonbury vest that was designed by Banksy is up for a design award this year, which is really exciting. If you don't remember this was actually a pretty iconic moment in Glastonbury Festival history. Stormzy in 2019 made waves. He was the first Black solo British artist to headline the major festival, but he also wore a statement outfit when he performed, which was this really crazy looking stab-proof vest that was actually created by Banksy. He wore the vest as a comment on Britain's ongoing knife crime crisis and racial inequality in the criminal justice system, which is an issue that's close to his heart. He speaks about it often publicly and also addresses it often in his songs and his music as well. So the vest is now up for a Beazley Design of the Year award, and the winner of that will be announced by the London Design Museum next month. So curious to see if he'll win. It was definitely an iconic and memorable vest though, for sure. Dance music platform Resident Advisor is defending their £750,000 government grant that they received. Last week, we talked a little bit about this. Music venues and businesses in the UK had been awarded funds from the government's grant scheme meant to support the arts. There were a couple venues that are really well known in the dance music space that actually ended up receiving some grants. But interestingly enough, Resident Advisor was actually among the list. Their status as recipients of £750,000 was ended up being one of the most generous amounts awarded, and it actually ended up causing a bit of controversy online from people in the scene. A couple people were pointing out that Resident Advisor is a for-profit ticketing service, so this is a bit different than a venue, although of course easy to make the connection that of course their business has been affected as well. People are not buying tickets to go out to events regularly anymore. There were a couple names that had specifically spoken out on Twitter. DJ producer Mint Royale called it an unfathomable thing to have happened, and meanwhile DJ Dave Clark demanded on Twitter that the platform be upfront and clear about how many jobs had been saved via the grant. The site's co-founder, his name is Nick Sabine, said the pandemic had caused a 95% loss of revenue, and he expected no meaningful recovery for at least the next 6 months. And the grant is supposed to cover about 30% of losses until April 2021. He said that 75% of the grant will go towards retaining jobs and continuing to support critically important causes. Earlier, I believe it was last year or a couple months ago, the platform made a commitment to diversify its staff and coverage because they have been criticized in the past for being overwhelmingly focused on white artists. And then, of course, he explained that the remaining 25% will be used to support its network of creative freelancers. So hopefully that's all true, because of course it is really important to keep platforms and journalists working in a time like this as well. Things are very tough for media, and hopefully that answer clarifies a little bit about where the money is going. Last but not least, a bit of a disheartening report, but again, as always, it is important to cover this news during this time. A new report from the Concert Promoter Association shows that 170,000 jobs might be lost in the live music industry before the end of 2020. This is kind of something that we all know. The industry has been suffering. There is no end in sight for COVID and the return of large-scale music events, or large-scale live events, I should say. So this new report shows that over 26,000 permanent jobs will be lost in the live music industry before the end of the year if government support is withdrawn. I should note also that this study was done in the UK, so we're talking about the UK specifically. The report also reveals the positive impact of the Culture Recovery Fund, which we just talked about. That's the same fund that awarded a great sum of money to Resident Advisor and a couple other venues as well. It's offered a lifeline to a range of businesses in the live music industry, but the good news is tempered by the fact that 80% of the employees will still be relying on the furlough scheme, which actually will end in less than a month. So they added a couple other important statistics to note, like for example in 2019, the live music industry contributed £4.5 billion to the UK economy. Of course, we all know that the UK has a really healthy, typically thriving live music scene, and it's definitely been hard to kind of watch the conversation unfold over there as far as the lack of support that the government has given to artists and creatives in the industry. Thankfully, the Culture Recovery Fund has had a significant impact, safeguarding around 10,000 at-risk employees, but if you think about it, 10,000 is not a huge number compared to the potential 170,000 jobs that the report has found could be lost by the end of 2020. That's the news for this week on the news floor. This week on The Hub, I have to say we've got a couple of really fun releases and tracks to talk about. We're going to start with Pete Tong's essential new tune, which this week goes to Duck Sauce's new track called Mesmerize. You guys probably know about Duck Sauce. Of course, it's A-Track and Armin van Helden. This is actually going to be the follow-up track to one that they released earlier this year called Smiley Face, which came out, and it was their first original release in over 6 years. So it's definitely been a long time since the Barbra Streisand days of Duck Sauce. So Mesmerize premiered with this amazing music video. Hopefully we can get a little clip of it up here. But if you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out. It's kind of hard to explain, honestly, but it's a pretty out there take on what a cool club scene looks like in a music video, with some hilarious kind of computer graphic renderings of A-Track and Armin van Helden. The pair were actually set to play Coachella earlier this year. Of course, we all know that didn't get to happen, but it looks like there's going to be new music to come from the duo. So let's take a listen right now.
Oh, yes, you do. Oh, you hypnotize me, mesmerize me with your love, boy. Oh, yes, you do. Oh, you hypnotize me, mesmerize me with your love, boy. Oh, yes, you do. Oh, you hypnotize me, mesmerize me with your love, boy. Oh, yes, you do. Oh, you hypnotize me, mesmerize me with your love, boy. Oh, yes, you do. Oh, you hypnotize me, mesmerize me with your love, boy. Oh, yes, you do. Oh, you hypnotize me, mesmerize me with your.
This week, the Beatport #1 goes to a track that might look like an old classic, but it's actually a new rework of an old favorite. Of course, it is Tin Liquor's rework of an old classic called Children by the late Robert Miles. If you don't know it already, Children is an iconic track that ended up being a really pivotal release for the entire genre of trance music. It has this really high energy, but at the same time, melodic and sort of feathery, heavenly type feeling. And there was actually a specific reason why Robert Miles wanted to create this song. And if you already know this story, feel free to just tune me out for the next few seconds. But for those who don't know, in the late 90s, the rave scene was booming in Italy, and actually the country had sort of experienced this strange problem where there was a rise in car crashes that was attributed to attendees who were driving really long distances to get to these late night rave shows. And they were getting in car crashes because, of course, they were tired, kind of strung out, whatever it might be. The problem was so bad that Italians actually came up with a phrase that ended up translating to Saturday night slaughter. So as you can imagine, it was a pretty horrible and common problem. So Robert Miles actually was motivated to create a high energy song that had a bit of a more softer melodic tone to it, and he wanted it to specifically be fitting to be played as the last tune of a set. So it would kind of bring some calm, some nostalgia and emotion to ravers that had been on this really high frequency, frenetic energy all night. He was hoping that this would, help save some lives, which it kind of ended up doing. Robert Miles passed away in 2017, unfortunately, but now Dutch producers Tin Liquor have hit their first #1 on Beatport with a hypnotic, darker version of the original. They created the song originally as an edit back in 2019 and said that they had never thought that they would actually be able to release it as a full original, and now it's here, so we're going to take a listen right now. For this week's NEWSFLOOR track of the week, we are going with Eric Prydz' Nopus. You probably have heard this song. If you're a fan of his, you've definitely heard this song because he actually played it first back in 2016, which feels like an eternity ago, during one of his epic visual live shows at EDC in Las Vegas. It's been a long time coming. Of course, Nopus is the first original release from the producer under his full name, Eric Prydz, since his album Opus released back in 2016. So the first bit of original new music from Eric Prydz, not his other monikers. In Eric Prydz style, it's sweeping, it's dramatic, progressive house. It feels futuristic and fit for space. But of course, also for a big festival dance floor, I listen to it and I immediately think, I can't wait to dance to this at a big festival, hopefully with a bunch of people one day soon. It's out now on Ministry of Sound Records, and his team actually put together a fantastic music video that is a compilation of sorts of some of his most mind-blowing moments and visuals from over the years of his past few shows. So let's check it out now. This week for the NEWSFLOOR pick of the week, I had the pleasure of sitting down with DJ Eclipse for a brief chat about his upcoming new album. It is coming out this Friday on October 30th. It's called Vintage Future 2. It is such an awesome collection of sounds that feel nostalgic but with an updated twist. It's housey, it's got hip-hop influences, but you listen to it and you want to dance. We talked a little bit about not only his inspirations and makings of behind the album, but also some recent controversial topics that he's been speaking out about that are definitely relevant, definitely timely. I always appreciate it when an artist feels so passionately about a topic and they're willing to kind of put themselves out there and start a conversation about it. Such a fantastic character. Stay tuned. We're going to get into the interview right now. And if you stick around, we're actually going to get a sneak preview of his first track off the album called Reynolds Street Groove. So stay locked in. Hey, Clips, how are you?
Good. How are you, Valerie?
I'm good. It is so awesome to have you on the show. I'm excited. I've been a fan of yours for a while, and I feel like I'm catching you again at such an awesome moment. I'm so blessed on this show. I always get to catch artists at the coolest moments in their careers, even during a crazy time like quarantine. Congrats on your album that's coming out in just a few days, Vintage Future 2.
Thank
How does
you.
it feel?
It feels good. It was kind of overdue, and I just really kind of waffled around back and forth when I was going to finally drop it, and I just finally got to the point where I was like, you know what, this has got to come out.
Yeah. I feel like I've heard that a lot from artists who have been sitting on some good, amazing music, trying to figure out when is the right time to release it during this time. But I'm so glad you decided to because it is such an awesome collection of sounds. It feels classic, but at the same time modern and updated. So I think the name that you picked is
Yeah.
totally perfect. Talk to me a little bit about, your inspirations and your mindset creating the album.
I mean, it's just I've always liked the old school original house, and then it's like if you could take the roots of house music and kind of put your own spin to it to kind of, I don't know if the word's like really modernize it or
Mhm.
just really kind of, you know, paying tribute to the roots of it, but at the same time adding your own spin to it, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've achieved just that. And it's always an interesting subject right now where I feel like people's listening habits are a bit different as they're kind of like stuck at home. We're not really able to go celebrate like really fun sounds on the dance floor like we typically do. But your album is so fun. So I wonder, from a personal standpoint, what do you hope that people will take away after a solid listen through Vintage Future 2?
I really want them just to take away just exactly what you said, to really have fun. I mean, you got so much serious stuff going on. You got, the election going on, you got COVID going on, you've got, people going through economic, times and stuff like that. And it's like, not to act like those things don't exist, but sometimes you just need a break from it, and that's kind of
Totally.
why I made the album the length that I made it, which is why there's not a lot of long songs. I wanted to be quickly digestible, easily to listen to, and hopefully by the time you reach the end, you don't even notice that you hit the end. So,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. I mean, I definitely got that feeling, and I think I was like picking up on some of the fun flavor in it. The song French Toast, I was like, this is hilarious. I love this vibe. So I appreciate that that kind of brought a smile to my face, and I think it'll definitely bring the same feeling to people who are listening to it.
because so much of it's so
So
serious. Like so much
it's so
dance music,
serious.
it got so serious, and I was like, you know what? Why not just have fun with it? And so, the whole Breakfast trilogy, like French Toast, was the last of that series, and and then even with shooting the video, I almost set myself on fire. It was worth it. So, you know,
Oh my gosh. Well, that sounds like a story all in it of itself. But besides the album, there's so much I want to ask you about. And I told you before, I wish that I could have you on here for a full hour to talk about all of the experiences that you've had and things that you could probably shed light on. But let's start with the first one. Besides the album, I know you're a man of many talents, photography being one of them. I was
yeah.
personally blown away by some of the shots that I was shown that you captured, this summer. You spent a lot of time documenting the Black Lives Matter protest, the George Floyd protest. And it's no surprise that the shots that you captured were featured in, Time, New York Magazine. I know that there was also an art gallery exhibition in your hometown. How does it feel for you? And this might be a loaded question. I feel like nowadays it's always a loaded question to ask, how are you
Right.
feeling? But how do you feel, to be able to share your art and what you experienced in this way?
I mean, I didn't go with the intention of all of it happening, but I kind of am glad that it happened because the reason why I went to shoot it was that a lot of these people won't get interviews like this. A lot of them won't be, asked by a newspaper or a local TV news station. Like that only moment to make their voices heard was that one moment. So if you can capture that moment and then make that speak way longer than the moment, then that was kind of the purpose. So I feel good that it happened. I feel blessed it happened. Especially like being here in Indiana, like I didn't expect it at all. So, it's just good to see that people's voices are being heard.
Yeah, I think if anything we've learned in the political climate over the past few years, it is so important to not only see what's going on around you, but also see what's going on around other parts of the world too. So that's a fantastic perspective to hear as well. And of course, from the music industry side of things, I know that around the protest, it ignited, this other wave of action that happened in and around music industry, music business, about
Right.
conversations about, Black representation. And I know that you spoke a little bit about this on your latest episode of Blacklight Sessions, your podcast,
Right.
addressing what I think is, a very important point, and that more of like, in a way, more of the real issue and at heart of the problem of the lack of Black representation in dance music, and forgetting a little bit about, the roots, not only forgetting about the roots, but also bringing that feeling to modern day. I would start by saying I want to encourage everyone who's tuning in to listen to your podcast because I think you explain it best. But, you know, if you could leave the music industry with a shorter version of action of that you would encourage the music industry to do, what would you want to say? What would you want them to hear?
Uh, One, I would want them to realize that it took intent. And that was one thing I talked about in the podcast that, there's a difference between just blind omission or, oh, I wasn't aware. And then there's just flat out intent. And to go the amount of time that they've went took a lot of intent, to know that these artists exist and just blatantly just kind of sweep 'em under the rug. But then at the same time, built a multi-billion-dollar industry off the backs of Black artists and artists were not able in some cases to bury themselves, or some that are able to pay medical bills because these companies have owned their masters in perpetuity and they refuse to give them back. And so a lot of the things that have been done that's been called, making changes really haven't been changes at all. They've kind of been things that can easily be reverted. So if it's not real conversations about, giving the original pioneers of music their masters back, bringing more executives of color, women of, color into more executive positions to be at the table to make these decisions. Like you can keep yelling at the window and hope they hear you, or you can be at the table and really be heard. And those are the things I think that really need to happen.
Yeah, I fully hear that. And I think that I see that conversation point come up often, maybe a day or two into these waves of conversation where it's not about the performative stuff. We don't want name changes. We don't want those kind of silly campaigns. It is really about bringing people to the table and making long lasting change. Even I think it was a couple weeks ago when I saw that Kevin Saunderson got his first essential mix. I was like, that is crazy that we let him go
Yeah,
for so long without having an essential mix. Like, who let that happen? Oh,
they did. And that's the thing. That's why I said it has to do with intent. You can't do those things and just say, well, we just didn't get to it. You really intended to do that. And that was because there was just I have a hard time even calling it really racist. I just feel like that it was more of a just a form of gentrification. It was like,
mm,
can we take this black art form and make it our art form? You know, and I think I try to look at it more as gentrification more than racism because I don't really
sure.
want to believe that everyone is racist. I don't believe that. I just think some of it is just greed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a very powerful perspective, and I definitely agree with you. And I hope that I appreciate that you use your voice in this way. And I encourage everyone to go follow your Blacklight Sessions podcast. Hopefully, you'll be talking more about this and shedding light and knowledge. Thank you for joining me on the news floor here. Are you going to be
Thank you.
celebrating Vintage Futures release? Is there anything we should tune into and look out for?
I mean, it's cold here in Indiana, so not too much celebrating. I may try to shoot some videos for the songs as best way as possible. But other than that, I just really want people to enjoy the album, support the album. Just that's really it. And just to be safe, wear a mask, don't forget to vote. Let's do the things that are important.
Yes, important ending messages. Thank you so much. And then, so after this interview, we're going to play a track from Vintage Future 2. I'm going to let you pick which track do you want to play and show the people a little preview of after this. You choose.
I think it would be Reynolds Street Groove, the first track on the album, just because Reynolds Street was a very important street growing up, and I just really wanted to name the track that, and it's more of a musical song. It's not really just hardcore four to the floor. It's really just kind of got more musical vibe to it. So I'll probably say that one.
Perfect. Well, we're going to get a listen to that right after this. Thank you so much, Clips, for joining me. And again, congrats on the album. We're all
Thank you,
going to love
Valerie,
it.
so much. I appreciate it.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Now we have arrived at the Stream Informers section of the News Floor show. This part is, of course, all thanks to our friends at Stream Informer. If you don't already follow them on Instagram, you're not in the newsletter, you gotta get up to date. Go find them. It's literally at Stream Informer. They post daily schedules of streams that you shouldn't miss every single day, which is awesome. But of course, every week we do a weekly recap here on the news floor. They point out some of the best streams from last week that you might have missed, and then a couple that you have to tune into this week. So let's start with what already happened. Last week, as you know, we spoke to Jubilee ahead of the release of her 2-track release and heard her tune, Are We There Yet?, which is so awesome, clubby, energetic, really cool. And we actually talked about this in her interview as well. She was doing a stream, at the time it hadn't happened yet, she was doing a stream taking place at Brooklyn venue called Elsewhere. The club is so awesome, I miss it so much. If you missed it, she actually did a 4-hour session, and as usual, touched on a little bit of this and a little bit of that, some breakbeat, electro, techno, house club. She's a fantastic DJ. It was super fun. Hopefully you tuned into that. And as far as this week, weirdly, I almost forgot that this week is actually Halloween weekend. Typically, people are partying starting last weekend and then going into this week, and it's just so tiring. And it's funny, even by the time Halloween rolls around, you're like already too Halloweened out. Of course, we are living in 2020 in a time of quarantine, so there are no events to go out to. But thankfully, if you're looking to jam out at home, maybe you want to get dressed up and party, I don't know, whatever your vibe is, I'm cool with that. But if you're looking to jam out at home, there are plenty of streams to soundtrack your weekend. The first up is label Interdimensional Transmissions from Detroit, and the Bunker NY in New York are teaming up for a virtual festival. And of course, as you can imagine, with both of those names kind of tacked on board, it's going to be a fantastic lineup. They've got Danny Days, Eris Drew, Solar, ADAB, Lauren Flax, and many more. That all goes down on Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern on the Bunker New York stream, so tune in over there. Also on Saturday, plenty going on. Flying Lotus and Brain Feeder are doing a collaboration stream, of course featuring Flying Lotus himself, as well as a host of other Brain Feeder artists. That's going to be a ticketed stream through Mixcloud, who actually announced a bunch of big ticketed streams that are coming up. So that's kind of a new contender, new player on the scene. Check it out. Go to Mixcloud for full info. And if you've enjoyed this little bit, like I said, you can follow Stream Informer for more daily updates. This week on The Circuit, which of course is our segment where we talk to people from in and around the world of rave, whether it's event promoters, people who are doing something culturally, interesting things that are happening that aren't necessarily artist-led. We are talking to those people on this segment of the show, and this week I caught up with the legendary North American promoter Disco Donnie, who has been staying really busy despite an unprecedented year of change and disruption, especially on the live event side of things. He's been doing a multitude of successful drive-in shows in states like Texas, Florida, and North Carolina, and with artists like Major Lazer and talents from the bass music side of things like Subtronics, Adventure Club, etc. So, it was really interesting to sit down with him, hear about some of the different ways that he's approaching drive-in shows. Of course, they're so different compared to real life in-person shows, I should say. So we hear about some of the challenges and hopefully maybe convince you to go attend one if you haven't checked one out yourself. I think they can still be really fun. I personally haven't gone to one yet, but I'm definitely open and curious to it. So anyways, we're going to get into the conversation with Disco Donnie right now, so lock in. Hey Donnie, thank you so much for joining us here on the news floor. How are you?
Well, I mean, I'm still alive, so that's a good thing right now. So
Yeah, it's always a bit of a loaded question, but I feel
exactly.
Yeah, I feel like you've been so proactive and actually been able to, take hold of 2020 in a way that a lot of people in live events and live music are not yet able to do, which is why I'm really excited to talk to you today. Quarantine, as we all know, started in March. And I was really impressed to see that by May, you had already put together No Parking on the Dance Floor, which is, of course, your kind of drive-in show series. I know March kind of feels like, at this point, feels like it was like 10 years ago now. But I would love for you to kind of walk me through the process of what was it like for you guys, when everything started happening? What was it like in the Disco Donnie offices? And how did you guys end up making those pivots to, take hold of 2020 again?
Well, it was all kind of crazy. I actually remember the last day of when the music died. I had seen what was going on in Europe, so I was following it closely. And we had a bunch of shows in March. And I remember like on March 12th, we had Excision at a country bar in San Antonio. And, it was like, that was like the last day. We had 4,000 people. The next day, Live Nation, AAG shut down all their shows. And it's kind of when the whole nation shut down. So, it was definitely complicated because we had, literally on March 12th, we had like 300 shows confirmed. And by March 13th, the next day, we had canceled like 100 shows. So it was just crazy times and just trying to figure it out. Although I saw what was possible coming, I just never knew that what it was going to look like on the end. So it was a madhouse. It's almost as hard canceling a show as setting one up. So we just had to reverse engineer everything. So that took up a lot of our time. And then we started planning on what was next.
Right. So, at what point did you kind of go drive-in shows are the answer? Was that something that was obvious to you, or how did that
No,
idea come
no,
up?
not at all. I saw them like everyone else that they were doing them in Europe. And I remember Kevin Gimbel, which is an agent at UTA. He's like, "Oh, I'm starting to get offers for drive-ins." So we have our team call, and I'm like, "Listen, people are going to start doing these drive-ins. They look terrible. I just saw the ones in Europe, and people were in their cars honking, and
Right.
I just said
Those
this will.
early days of
I
quarantine.
just said this will never work in the U.S., but I guess they're getting offers, so let's start looking into it. But let me tell you, 100%, this will never work. That's what I told my team. And then literally like a week later, I was like, okay, we're doing drive-ins. I'm all in. So
Whoa.
uh, I don't think, yeah, they
Complete
don't
pivot.
listen. Yeah, they shouldn't listen to me. Like I'm 50-50 on my predictions. So yeah, I mean, it was crazy times. We were early. We weren't the first, but we were since we had just become independent, we could move fast and get them announced. I mean, like I wouldn't have been able to do them so quickly and get them up in May because and under the old system because we would have to have contracts and insurance from
Right.
all this stuff goes together and we were just moving fast and getting it done and handshake deals and so yeah we were one of the first and we think we were doing something that was important to the community.
I feel like I've heard a lot of people say that, because of all the disruption of COVID and the pandemic, that weirdly the music industry has gone back to its roots of just being like the ones that experiment, that work quickly, that don't do things by like the music industry rules anymore. And that kind of sounds like that's exactly what happened with you guys when considering drive-in shows.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feel it. We were doing it. There was no. It was back to the in the '90s when I was 20 years old. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing on drive-ins. So, I mean, it's kind of figuring it out as you go, and that's kind of what we've been doing, and we've been learning. We've done over 20 of them now, and each one of them is an adventure. It feels like literally when I was doing shows in warehouses that each one of them could get shut down or some they could change the laws or whatever. So each drive-in
Right.
actually feels that way. And I know it's hard to explain to people because they're like, oh, wait, you didn't get this signed off on by the mayor, the governor. It's like, no, it's like, no, we're just doing it. I mean, so we're trying to get our the everything in line, but it's not that easy.
Yeah.
People have other things to do. They're not worried about if a drive-in rave, right? They're worried about their hospitals and their caseload and stuff like that. So we're like low on the totem pole. So we just try to go under the radar.
Right, right. And that's an interesting question because I mean, even interesting topic, I mean, because even with all the craziness happening in the world and now with this kind of new concept of drive-in shows, I'm sure I can only imagine having no promoter experience myself how complicated it must be because there's all sorts of different format changes and just policies and regulations. So, what would you say what are the biggest challenges that you've been noticing as you're planning these drive-in shows?
Well, these are like mini festivals, so um, they're really not that easy to set up. We've also been very concerned about the price points. Um,
Right.
a lot of our fans are in the service industry,
Mhm.
and um, I waited tables for 7 years. I mean, I'm sure they're making less money or they lost their jobs, so it's kind of hard to really uh, give charge somebody $50 for a ticket. So we've been very sensitive to that, and also it's been hard to really make money on these
Mhm.
because of that, and because as we set these up, they started opening. As we set these up, of course, people came after us that we were doing these shows. We were greedy. We were going to kill people. This is during COVID. But as
Right.
our first one started happening, they opened up the bars. So that
You're
became
like,
that's competition as well, right? I mean,
yeah.
I don't have a job. I can go down the street and with my friends and go to the bar and spend $20, or I'm going to buy a $40 ticket. I mean, I know what I would do. I'd probably go down to the bar. So it basically, it's been a battle, and of course the
Yeah.
rules have changed. We were doing them, the bars opened, everybody we started doing them. The all EDM Twitter was against us, and then the bars opened, so then they all EDM Twitter went against the bars, so we were
Right.
fine. Then the bars closed, and we kept doing them. We never stopped. And we're like, well, "You'll be back." We
Yeah.
knew what was going to happen, and EDM Twitter was like, "Oh, you're still here. We're going to get you now." So it's been a back and forth. Right now, the bars are open pretty much everywhere. We're doing drive-ins,
Mhm.
so we're being kind of left alone. But I'll tell you, I can predict that in the next 3 or 4 weeks, EDM Twitter will be against drive-ins. I can
Oh,
promise you that. I could put it in your book right now because when those bars close, they got to go after somebody, and it's
right.
going to be me.
It's tough. I mean, kudos to you, honestly, for being the one to do the, you have so many years of experience, but also to be trying something new during a time like this where even week to week, we never know what the political climate's going to look like or if there's going to be some other new world event. I know in here in California, it's fires all the time, but I can only imagine how difficult it must be to kind of balance the criticism while also wanting to fulfill this kind of need. And obviously, there's this huge empty hole as far as the live music industry is concerned right now. To be able to actually provide an opportunity for not only artists, but also all those people who work behind the scenes and promoters like yourself. I find it really interesting that you kind of explained that even a couple months ago, you were on the same side of a lot of people, a lot of folks who are sitting here going, I don't want to go to a drive-in show. Like, that's not as cool as a real live show. Obviously, that's not an option. What do you think? What would you want to tell those people who are, maybe they've considered going, maybe they're sitting on the fence, maybe they're even a naysayer. Like, what would you want to tell them? And try and convince them that drive-in shows are a great kind of temporary option right now.
Well, I mean, I think this to go back to your point of like people the criticism. I mean, it doesn't bother me. I've been doing this 26 years, but they go after the artist. So
Right.
they have a new target, right? And the artists are
Mm-hmm.
young and they're living their best life and they've never had criticism. So they're going after the artists and kind of we've always done this. We've done this from the beginning. People used to mail me in the snail mail letters like hate mail, telling
Oh
me that if I
gosh.
raised the ticket prices to $20, I was going to ruin the scene and we wouldn't have anything. So
Well,
I'm
now they've
used
got
to it.
Twitter, so
Now they can just go right in somebody's DM and tell an artist that they're never going to listen to anything and he's terrible. And if I remember myself as a young 20-year-old getting that stuff and it affected me, so I know how it affects them. So I mean, I it all goes together. But what we're trying to do is, what we're trying to do is present a safe environment. Where people can get together. There's 50% of the crowd that don't care about what's going on, but we're just 50% of the crowd that really want to be in a safe environment, and we're targeting them. And I think that's important that they understand that yes, it's not the same thing. It's not going to be like you're at a festival. It's going to be different. But this is something. This is safe. There's underground parties going on. The bars are open, but this is something safe. And
right.
we're doing shows for 1,500 people that are in a space that holds 40,000 people. So if somebody comes into your space, just take two giant steps over. There's plenty of space. There's like you're outdoors. There's not been any super spreader events at drive-ins. I mean, I think this is about the safest you can get. And you can also hear the music. You can support the artists. You can support the promoters, the industry, the people like the sound guy, the light guy. We're just trying to keep the wheel going because the scene has been always there's always been an influx and outflux of people. It's been a
Mhm.
constant thing. So I keep spitting for some reason. But I think it's this microphone. But it's basically, we don't have that right now. So I don't know what this looks like on the other side. We probably have a big outflux of people that are moving on to something else, that are doing video games or something or anything besides electronic music festivals. So we have that outflux. We need to bring in that influx, and I think that hopefully these events, people can come, new people, and see what's going on in the community and get involved. So when we come through this, we'll still have a scene.
I mean,
I don't know if
I
that was
love
the
that.
question, but
No, I mean, yeah, that totally answers it. And I think that I would even add to it and say that, I'm very much on your side. I haven't actually been to a drive-in show myself, but I totally recognize that right now we just need more reasons to celebrate the good things in life, I think. And I know that the dance music community sometimes, even though we are like a really loving and, accepting community, a lot of the times new things they face a lot of challenge and people are not really willing to try new things. But, kudos to you for going out there and creating an opportunity for people to come together and just enjoy good music, celebrate with some COVID-safe friends, hopefully. But yeah, so what's coming up next? Let's end this on a note of like what people can look out for.
positivity. Yes, the EDM scene is very loving for the first 6 months. It's like that boyfriend. He's like very nice to you. He doesn't watch ESPN. He's
man.
he's watching all your shows, like telenovelas, whatever you want. That guy's doing that. And then EDM just, then you get into the bad boyfriend, right? And everybody's negative and everything's bad.
No.
So, okay.
Let's reel them back in.
Reel them back in. No, we get in there. We get in there for the love and the happiness and stuff like that. And some people go sideways, but I digress. What was the question?
I was just asking what's coming up next. What shows should we be on the lookout for from?
We have a lot this weekend. I have Major Lazer tonight. Oh, well, this is probably not going to be tonight, but
on Wednesday. So
okay,
tomorrow.
on Wednesday. Okay. What we have Subtronics, 2 shows in Orlando. We have 2 friends in Charlotte. We have Adventure Club in we have Subtronics in Kansas City, Adventure Club in Raleigh, North Carolina. So we have a lot going on. Normally we'd be doing 30 shows and a festival, but we have 8 shows this week, so it's kind of like we're actually working.
I love that. I mean, honestly, like I said, we're celebrating the little things across the whole world, but also specifically in the live music industry. So I am cheering you on. I will drop some links over in the chat so people can keep up with you and keep up on the events that are coming up. Thank you so much, Disco Donnie.
Thank you.
And just like that, we have reached the end of another episode here of the News Floor with your host, Valerie Lee, Miss Gal. Thank you guys for tuning in every week. It is so awesome to hear your thoughts and opinions. I feel like a lot of you are actually learning about dance music, which is awesome. Maybe you're coming from the front page and aren't really familiar. So you've come to the right place because this is kind of the one-stop shop for everything. We go over news, conversation, best new tunes, and of course interviews with some awesome artists from all around the world of rave. Feel free to shout me out in the chat if you guys have thoughts on who should come on board for an interview for next week or maybe weeks ahead. I'd love to know which releases that are on your radar that you want to hear more about. I will be sure to try and get those conversations with those people. If not here, then shout me out on socials. I'm at the News Floor on Instagram and Twitter. We're always posting clips. We're always looking for info and comments and feedback. And of course, you can follow and subscribe to the channel. There's so much cool programming. There's shows with Togi Monster and Soul Clap, and there's only more to come. So thanks for joining for another week of the News Floor, and I will see you next week.